Chapter 14, Sheriff Drain. Bob Henderson met up with Judy Hunsaker at a Dusty Roads convenience store on the outskirts of Olive Branch, Mississippi. Judy sat in her blah rental sedan and sipped on a giant latte as her eyes danced warily, ever on guard for trouble. Bob Henderson skated his max fuel efficient rental car into the spot next to Judy Hunsaker on her passenger side. He unbuckled his seatbelt and stepped out of the hamster mobile. He opened Judy's passenger door and slid into the vinyl seat. He was startled by Judy, who threw her arms around his neck and stuck her tongue deep into his throat. When Bob Henderson regained full consciousness, Judy Hunsaker was talking to him like a mother reminding her child of his manners prior to a family reunion. With the Mexican Alliance roundup in its final stages, there was time for after-hours socializing. Some members of Veritas, mostly local folks, had been invited to the home of a co-moderator, Sheriff Leonard Drain, who resided just outside of Olive Branch, Mississippi. Judy Hunsaker reminded Bob Henderson that they could not present themselves as a couple. The married man who carried on with a subordinate, a cagey subordinate who might just be opportunistic enough to litigate, refrained from expressing that he did not need such reminders. He listened as the maternal presence explained the intricacies of Veritas and what they could expect tonight. And Bob Henderson reminded his chum that he was one of the first members of Veritas. Judy might have become a co-moderator, but he predated her, and there was a lot about Veritas that she did not know. Like a bratty sister, Judy Hunsaker reminded her elder that she was one of the first 100 members, and as a moderator, she knew a lot about human nature that even a know-it-all like Bob Henderson might not know. Not everyone admits sexual arousal, so it's best not to acknowledge it, Judy Hunsaker remarked. They had hashed over the subject a few times before. Bob Henderson held the belief that all Veritas members were either consciously or unconsciously aroused by Veritas material. Judy had read up on SPAs, sexual precursor activities, and had previously discussed the subject with Bob Henderson. A Washington University professor had discovered that certain activities, motorcycle riding, watching horror films, attending football games, caused significant arousal, sometimes hours after the completion of the activity. Subjects were often unaware of their own sexual precursors, but they always expressed enthusiasm for their particular SPA. Judy Hunsaker also reminded Bob Henderson that not every Veritas member shared their taste for psychological terror. The vast majority of members preferred more graphic content. They might be a symphony cellist at a headbanger's ball. Even in subcultures, there are subcultures, Bob Henderson summarized. Even in subcultures, Judy Hunsaker repeated. Through the seemingly endless arrangement of treeless subdivisions, Judy Hunsaker gassed her bland mobile at an average speed of 7 miles over the limit. Bob Henderson followed close behind as the two chatted on the in-dash speakerphones. Judy Hunsaker turned into the broad driveway of Sheriff Drain, and Bob Henderson drove past her. Bob Henderson drove down the road for about 5 minutes. He then reversed direction and slowly putted back to Sheriff Drain's house. Bob marveled at the amount of yard that was covered in gravel. Either the sheriff loves to entertain or he hates to mow, Bob Henderson reasoned. Bob Henderson crept past a row of 6 neatly packed cars, one of which was Judy Hunsaker's rental. The gravel yard was not well lit, and Bob Henderson had some difficulty navigating. Where the gravel ended and some sort of embankment began, he saw an SUV, a large pickup truck, and an unmarked navy blue police car. Bob Henderson pulled in next to the unmarked police car. He grabbed his gifts, an FBI pen and a bottle of Johnny Walker for the sheriff, and flowers and Quantico mats for the sheriff's wife, and studied the house. It was huge. It seemed to be thrown together hastily with a lot of long rectangles and no real purpose in mind. 3 double-deck shoe boxes arranged in a Y shape. The lighted front door rested in the notch of the Y, and it was here that Bob Henderson rang the doorbell. The mock Venetian door opened immediately, and the broad shoulders of Sheriff Drain filled the entrance. Bob Henderson introduced himself, and the sheriff assisted him with his packages so that the 2 men could shake hands. Bob Henderson detected the start of a Masonic shake, but when he did not respond, the sheriff maneuvered a traditional handshake. Slow, strong, and deliberate. Constant eye contact. Sheriff Drain was tall and stout and square-jawed. At age 56, he looked like he could stack pallets or move furniture if he had to. He spoke softly and slowly with just a hint of southern accent. His scalp had enough strands of hair to be called balding. He was handsome in a bloodhound kind of way. The fast friends marched to the right wing of the house where Judy Hunziker and Doreen Drain chatted in the kitchen. Mrs. Drain was Leonard's bride of 35 years. Mrs. Drain was short and Rubenesque. Her hair was meticulously blonded and was arranged in elaborate curls that hung down to her propped-up breast. She had a warm smile and caramel eyes, and she seemed perfectly adapted to the role of hostess. Whereas the sheriff had but a trace of accent, Doreen seemed to be exaggerating hers. Hi was almost 3 syllables, and it took her about twice as long to say Bob. The Mississippi hospitality revealed itself immediately. Bob Henderson was given his choice of beverage, Coca-Cola, and the sheriff and Mrs. Drain offered boundless displays of gratitude for the gifts Bob and Judy had brought them. They were given a tour of the sprawling downstairs, the magazine-cover kitchen, the dining room with windows on 3 walls, the sheriff's home office, the living room, the rec room, the den. Bob committed one faux pas, referring to Doreen as Darlene, but the mistake was gently corrected and attributed to the sheriff's inarticulate introduction. Doreen kept saying, "Next time you come down here, and we got plenty of guest rooms with our girls all grown up." Bob Henderson had never felt so welcome, even with his own family. They viewed wall photos and mementos. The guests learned that there were 3 Drain daughters, and all 3 girls had given them grandkids. They walked past the view room, or V room as the sheriff referred to it. The door was closed, and the soundproof room offered only its silence. The sheriff was proud of that feature. Once more in the kitchen, Bob Henderson and Judy Hunziker loaded up oversized plates with a smorgasbord of finger foods, as well as an assortment of potato salads, macaroni salads, and jello salads. Fried chicken wings, mini hot dogs, mini burgers, finger sandwiches, chips and pretzels, and carrot and celery sticks. The china was selected for its size, and the silverware and crystal were selected for their beauty. Sheriff Drain produced a stainless steel food cart, and Bob Henderson and Judy Hunziker loaded their food as well as a few cokes and ginger ales, and the threesome made their way to the V room. Judy asked Doreen to join them, but she replied, "Nope, I'm a civilian." That was that. The 4 viewers froze the screens as the sheriff led his guest inside. Sheriff Drain introduced them as B and J. The 4 middle-aged white men were introduced as Depp, Troop, Memphis, and Hennessy. Bob Henderson sensed that the men knew each other, and he privately opined that if he and Judy were not in attendance, they probably would not have used aliases. The V room surpassed anything Bob and Judy had ever seen. The two long walls were divided in half, and all four screens showed the same footage at the same time, so that people who sat back to back had pretty much the same viewing experience. The sound was crystal clear without overwhelming the audience. But the most impressive feature was the row of view stations. The view station was a fancy term for plush recliners that featured wraparound trays that allowed the seated to dine comfortably with knife and fork and not feel like he was eating off a TV tray. Bob Henderson and Judy Hunziker sat next to each other with their backs to the other viewers. Depp unfroze the blurred screen, and in a matter of seconds the assembled were treated to a Puerto Rican teenager getting shot in the mouth with a .357. There was hooting and hollering, and the vid went to slow-mo. The perpetrator clenched his mouth, and blood streamed between his fingers, ever so slowly. This was followed by a car crash decapitation, a hostage taker struck in the head by a SWAT team sniper, a prison assassination where the victim was stabbed 97 times, and a high-speed motorcycle crash that ended with a splat. Bob Henderson watched the proceedings with passing interest, savoring each delicious morsel with his gourmet style of eating. Small bites and slow chewing. He could never understand why people rush one of the finest pleasures of life. Even subcultures have subcultures, Judy Hunziker whispered to Bob. Bob Henderson turned to Judy Hunziker. She had hardly touched her food, and her left fist rested on her cheek. He paused before whispering to her, "You're a co-moderator. Surely you're not surprised." Judy Hunziker smiled and put a finger to her lips. The room took on the air of a frat party. The other guests were drinking, and they cheered each gushing wound and each cry of agony. Bob Henderson enjoyed the spectacle and the victuals. At one point, he saw Judy Hunziker stare at her plate and concentrate fully on her aliment. The viewing matter clearly disappointed her. Sheriff Drain sensed the FBI agent's lack of enthusiasm and swung by to talk to them. An amazing feature of his V room was the sonic wall. A few clicks on a keypad, and the area in front of Bob and Judy was audibly sealed with ambient noise that masked the hue and pitch of the video. "I should have known you wouldn't share the same taste as my bubbas," Sheriff Drain interjected. Bob Henderson and Judy Hunziker both insisted that they enjoyed themselves royally, but the sheriff was not fooled. "I know the kind of stuff you post," he said to Judy. "You come back Saturday night, and I promise you a gold mine. I got some nuggets that have been passed on to me that I just have not had time to post to the site, not with the roundup and all." Bob Henderson and Judy Hunziker both stated that they might be back home by Sunday, depending on their orders and bureau this and bureau that. Sheriff Drain cut them off. "Be here Sunday night. That's an order."